What I tell our developer clients and architects who we're working with, your project is not the project. The project is life. Your project will emerge from that understanding. So we ask our clients to throw away all their designs. Maybe they're good, we don't know, but more than likely, we need to discover first principles, how this place works, and then how this development can actually support how this place works. Your project is secondary if you care about regeneration and sustainability. That's an act of faith.
Hello and welcome to the Regenerative Design Podcast. I'm your host, Mathieu Mehuys, and in this show, I interview the leading authorities in the world of regenerative practices, people who do good and do well. Are you a person that cares about your environment and our planet, that wants to leave the planet to our children to be something that we can be truly proud of, to enjoy for many generations to come? But are you also a person that believes we can do all of this and do good in business? I have really good news for you. You're here listening to the podcast that is all about making our planet a better place and making your business more successful. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Regenerative Design Podcast with your host Mathieu. And today we have a very special guest. We have the amazing Bill Reed on our podcast. Bill Reed is the co-founder of Regenerative. You could call him one of the founding fathers of regeneration. It's a great honor to have you here, Bill. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Mathieu.
Yeah, I'd love to dig right in and understand, like, with all the experience that you have, what's your backstory? How did you decide to go into this regenerative development world?
Wow. Okay. By the way, I just want to make it clear that I'm not a founder of Regenerative. I'm an early adopter.
Oh, you're early adopters. Sorry about that.
So Regenerative heard me speak on integrative systems thinking the year that they were founded, and said, "You're kind of thinking the way we're thinking. You might like what we're doing." And so I said, "Indeed, I did." So I studied with Pamela Mang and then Carol Sanford for a number of years, while beginning to practice, while incorporating this work into my practice. So I'm an architect and planner, and I could say that it started. I'll give you the quick story because it shows you how geeky I was as a kid. But I was turned on to Lewis Mumford when I was about 13, 14 years old. Lewis Mumford is a worth reading, a social and architectural critic and commentarian in the 1900s. He died probably 20 years ago. But he wrote the book City and History, The Culture of Cities. But what it really inspired me was how he predicted how the automobile would destroy our cities. And I'm interested in quality of life. I've always wanted to be an architect. So I was given a half year of independent study to write a thesis when I was a junior in high school. And that subject of that was the sociological implications of urban and regional planning, which is definitely a very geeky subject for a teenager. So I was going to be a planner. And in planning school, it made no sense to me. Moving automobiles around, geopolitical issues. So I really had no one could give me, I didn't know enough to ask the right questions, but it wasn't until the sustainability movement came along that I realized that's what planning is for. And, but in the meantime, I pursued environmental concerns. So I've been doing this work since the mid-1970s, passive solar energy. Then U.S. Green Building Council came along and said, well, that's more whole than just working on energy, whole building. And then wrote a book with Seven Group on integrative systems thinking, because you just shouldn't be checking points. You need to be working to get this as a whole unified system. And so, and while we were writing that book and thinking about this subject, actually, the question occurred to me, where does one stop integrating? And that's a metaphysical question. And that basically leads to where we're practicing today. So how do we embrace the whole system? And the whole system means everything that you can imagine and everything you can't imagine. All the energies of the universe are what we're working with. So it's been a journey of integration, really. and what integrative systems thinking, that's what I was speaking on in Austin, Texas in 1995, when Regenesis heard me speak. Um, and again, where do we stop integrating? And that's the question we're really working with.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, I would love to understand more about your approach and why this, like, what made you click in terms of like, okay, I'm a planner. We look at projects in a kind of this is the project boundary, and then you soon enough realize like, oh, but whatever I'm doing here has an impact on the surrounding and vice versa. Why are we stuck to that? So when did that happen, and what was like the first project where you could actually expand, let's say, beyond the limits of the property boundary?
Yeah, wow. Um, I have to dredge my memory banks for that. But the realization really happened with the permaculture movement
Uh-huh.
and being aware that we could work with whole systems in terms of life and actually help life recover, not just limit the damage. Because the green building movement is pretty much about slowing down the damage. You know, as Bill McDonough says, sustainability is a slower way to die.
I love that.
And so that became pretty apparent when you realize, oh, we can actually work on the health of the system. Regenesis was formed by Pamela Mang and Ben Haggard and Joel Glansberg and Tim Murphy because Pamela was working with the whole social system and organizations. So organizational development, organizational psychology. How do we actually get people in relationship so they're more effective?
Oh, that was how Regenerative was founded, more on like the social structure of
No,
companies.
that's 50% of it. The other 50%
Oh,
was the permaculture movement because Ben
okay.
and Joel and Tim
Hmm.
represented the early practitioners in the permaculture world. They
Hmm.
founded the Drylands Institute, which lasted for a number of years. Um, and Pamela
Interesting.
thought, wait a minute, that's still not whole enough. There's the social system, there's the land system. That's crazy. This is a whole system. So how do we work with that? And
Hmm.
that's the technology in quotation marks that Regenesis developed previous to my engagement, and well, before Regenesis, Charlie Crone, Carol Sanford. Um, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting some of the other founders of this work. Their practice of regeneration goes back to Procter and Gamble in the late 1950s. So that's really the start. We talk about John Tim and Lyle speaking about it. And yes, from a landscape perspective, John Tim and Lyle definitely is the first guy that raised it, as well as Rodale Institute.
Oh yeah.
But as a concept of wholeness and working with the essence, relationship of essence to essence, that came out through Charlie Crone in the 1950s and 1960s.
Hmm.
So, and that lineage is based on a number of George Gurdjieff, John Bennett, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, the esoteric aspects of the major religions, Sufi, Kabbalah, Gnostic
Hmm.
Christians.
Hmm.
All of those groups were actually working with the Greeks, working on understanding life on its own terms.
Hmm.
How does life work as a unified system?
Hmm.
How do we, the esoteric religions, actually worked on not being saved, not returning to God, but the esoteric religions are how do we become God? How do we become as God would want us to be?
Hmm.
That's what the esoteric religions really. And then we shifted into patriarchal world, and that kind of everything went to hell after that. Um,
What do you mean? What? How did it
Oh,
went to hell?
looking into the patriarch well, so the religions that we have today, the
Yeah.
major Christianity and Judaism and,
Yeah.
Muslim are patriarchal religions.
Oh
There's
yeah.
a
I got you.
there's a domination, there's a
Yeah.
command and control aspect
Oh
to
yeah.
it. You do this, you'll be saved
Yeah.
kind of thing.
So
You
we
do
lost the
this
individual relationship of religion, kind of.
and agency as a
Yeah. Yeah.
result.
Yeah. That's it's like you gotta pass through us to get to God.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
interesting. So these are all the influences that built Regenesis and built your own life
Mhm.
because you met with the team of Regenesis and you started to work together. So I want to maybe rephrase my question in the sense of like maybe not the first project that you did, but let's
Oh,
say the
yeah.
first project where you felt like, oh, we're actually getting traction, we're onto something that gets great results and it's something that nobody's really doing. When
Yeah.
was that moment where you could see the
Well,
first results?
I use it. I use it all the time in my talks because it's actually so illustrative, and it was a failure in one respect. But it's
Hmm.
the Brattleboro Food Co-op in Brattleboro, Vermont, and that's in 2000, I think,
Hmm.
where actually there were other projects before that, but this was the first one where I really was on the carpet. I had to actually work the system appropriately,
Hmm.
and I didn't actually, but great lessons learned out of that. But that was a small grocery store, food cooperative in this relatively small town in Vermont, and they wanted to be a lead gold building.
Hmm.
And I asked the question, do you want lead or do you want sustainability? Because they're not the same thing. And and you know what lead is, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah. So the building
certification for building.
certification.
Yeah.
We worked with a few architects that it's interesting. They're like so focused on that, and so they ask us, "Can you put some birdhouses in the landscaping? Check. Can you do some this check?" It's
Hmm.
yeah, it's good, but it's very fragmented or very
Yeah,
like.
exactly. That's the problem. It's fragmented, but it
Hmm.
is good. Good reminder. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with it except that it keeps your mind fragmented.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, so they asked the question. I asked them the question: do you want lead or do you want sustainability? And they gave a great answer. They said, "I want both. We want both."
Hmm.
Good answer, actually. So that's when we started looking at not the grocery store, but the system the grocery store is nested within. Because
Yeah.
unless we're not, the context is everything.
Hmm.
And so this work is really about how do we add value to the system of life, and how does that system of life add value to our project? Is one way to
Hmm.
think about it. So there's a reciprocity, a mutual
Hmm.
benefit.
Hmm.
So the question was, and of course, that allows you to ask fundamental questions. What's the purpose of this project? Well, the purpose of this project is to house a grocery store. So there's this grocery store. Is its business sustainable itself? Because if the business isn't sustainable, then the building's not sustainable.
Hmm. Interesting.
So we asked the question, what happens if there's a truckers strike? Well, we're out of business in 3 days. What happens if a grocery store chain comes to town? Well, we're probably out of business in a year or two. So what's the one thing that an out of town grocery store chain or a truckers strike can't compete with? And that's local food.
Hmm.
So this became an exercise in self-sufficiency in food, developing the food system, which meant
Hmm.
that we had to study the where are the farms? Well, it turns out most of the farms are now gone, out of business. The soil's depleted and the nutrients are depleted. The best soil was in downtown Brattleboro.
Hmm.
So let's use that.
Good.
Well, we built. Well, no, you haven't built. You've only built up 35%. Where did most towns feed themselves in World War II? Backyard gardens, victory
Picture
gardens.
gardens. Yeah.
So the grocery store was programmed then to be an agricultural and soil extension service to teach people how to grow their own food and test their soil, a cannery to can their food, a daycare center to take care of the kids when the adults were doing that, a forest restoration, the U.S. Forest Service restoration group to work on the restoration of the watershed,
Hmm.
uh, a credit union to loan money to small farmers to come back again, um, an abattoir for hunters to dress their meat. I think that, and by the way, a grocery store. And so the system became paramount, which is the
Hmm.
point. And and then what happened is they were so excited. The executive board was so excited about hearing this. They said they had an emergency meeting with the board, and it was we weren't prepared, and it was a terrible meeting. And one of the board members said, what is this bullshit? We just wanted a grocery store."
Yeah.
So that lesson was a valuable one. We learned that the people are an integral part of the system, and we actually need to be working with the people in a developmental way, developing
Yeah.
their understanding and capability. And this is where the story of place came from, the idea of helping people see a North Star that unifies everybody, all these different interest groups. So to finish that story, we wrote a big report because we realized we've got to cover we need to give the Vermonters something, just not. So we wrote a long report explaining all this, and handed it in, and they about a year to the day, which is about what it takes for people to assimilate this paradigm shift. I got a call from the president saying, "Bill, we want to apologize to you. This is the greatest thing that's ever happened to us." And so he said, we realized that the building was not the point, that the system is the point.
Mm.
And so what was wonderful about that, so they developed a 100-year ends policy to begin to incorporate those ideas. And the other thing that's interesting, and this is why regeneration is such a powerful paradigm, is that when you build a field like that, a field of energy, of coherence, in any place, doesn't matter where, people sense that. And other cooperatives in the New England region called them up and said, "How do we do what you're doing? This is so cool." And so it's like this little pebble dropped in a pond, it ripples out.
Yeah.
And so that's why it was both a very successful project and a disaster.
This podcast is brought to you by the Garden of Your Dreams Masterclass. Are you struggling with finding the right tools and tricks for your garden? Are you lacking the confidence to be a self-sufficient gardener? Do you sometimes get overwhelmed by the lack of knowledge and time you have to actually do gardening? Then the Garden of Your Dreams Masterclass is for you. I'd love to understand, like, from that early experience and how you're currently operating, like, what I see that, to my opinion, kind of the danger of the regenerative movement is that, just like sustainability or the green wave or or even permaculture, that the let's say the bigger public thinks like, oh, that's something in the fringes, or that's like the green hippies, or that's someone, they're kind of out there and they're doing some work, but most people think like, oh, I don't care about that. And they also have their right because they come from different interest groups. So if you're going to an investor and you explain like, oh, you should do a green building because it's good for the birds and the ecology and it's better for this and that, he's going to be like, oh, I don't need none of that. I just want to hear what's the return of my investment.
Yeah.
So my question is, how did you start to work with all these different interest groups? And pretty much you have to align sometimes contradictory interest, and how do you bring those groups together? And so now we're talking about relationships. How do you build those relationships to make those wholes actually successful?
Yeah. Well, so there's a lot to unpack on that question.
Yeah.
So number one, we we use systemic frameworks to guide our thinking. This is shorthand for holding complexity. The Greeks used the geometric figures. Bucky Fuller used geometries to describe wholes. Bennett and Gurdjieff used prime numbers. But the math is something incredibly elegant and powerful about the energies that math conveys and geometries convey. And one of the most basic frameworks is the law of three.
Mhm.
And most of our work comes from people hearing about the law of three. So the law of three, you want me to just do a quick download of
Yeah,
what that is?
please. Yeah, thank you.
So all life, anything we do can be seen as an activating force. You want to build a building, or you want to develop some infrastructure, or you want to get married. I don't know, keep anything. There's there's a
There's a spark.
restraining force, a
Mhm.
restraining or a receiving force. So there's gravity, there's budgets, there's laws, um, or there's resistance from your partner that she or he may not want to get married, right? So the activating and restraining or receiving force. Our world lives in this framework, the duality framework.
The physical universe is duality.
Yeah, well, mental too. So that we think is that there's
True.
only one way to go. Either you're right or I'm right, or we compromise.
Mm.
So compromise or conceding means I'll give up a little, you give up a little. You think about politics. We'll give up some of our aspirations as long as you give up some of your aspirations, and we kind of we each acknowledged our ego has been beaten up a little, and we're proud of that, and we call it a day. So,
Mhm.
however, compromise is death. Now, I'm being overly generic here, but if we compromise, then we compromise the next time we meet, and then we compromise again, and then we compromise again. We drive ourselves into the ground.
Atrophy.
Yeah, and so nature doesn't work that way. Nature self-organizes for greater diversity and resilience, and it does that by harmonizing systems. So basically, nature has a third force. The third force is harmonization, not compromise. It doesn't negotiate, doesn't debate. And the qualifier here is you have to accept death as part of life. If you don't do that, then none of this works
Hmm.
because death is universal. And it's, Western culture is very funny about death.
Oh yeah,
But
totally.
so
But yeah, even in economics, companies come and go. It's normal.
sure, life is birth, life, death, rebirth. Birth,
Hmm.
life, death, rebirth. That's why the gyre is such an important symbol of
Hmm.
life. We do it every day. Oh, why did I do that? It made my wife so mad. I need to stop being so obnoxious or so
Hmm.
arrogant or whatever, right? And, I'll do better. So there's a bit of a death, and you rebirth yourself, and
Hmm.
hopefully you're learning and developing, evolving. That's what
Hmm.
life. This, by the way, all of this is about staying in the game of evolution. That's
Yeah.
so. What does it take? What does it take to evolve? And why do, wh- why must we evolve? If we don't evolve, what are we? That's a question. That's
Well,
a
we're dying.
metaphysics, huh?
We're
Like,
dying. If you don't evolve, if you don't grow, there's either growth or decay. That's
yeah, I think
the
so.
truth. Yeah.
So, where was I headed? I was headed somewhere.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you, but you're saying that nature doesn't work that way. It has the
The law
three
of three.
forces,
Yeah, yeah.
the
So
law
the
of
third.
three.
So when people see this, and many people have seen this, I give a lot of talks, and always talk about this. I say, if you're going to take anything away from the talk that I'm giving, this is the one to take away. Because if our politicians actually respected that, the idea that there's a third force, we would be in much different shape. But we think we have to win or lose. The lawyers are involved or compromise. And so we end up with the world is dysfunctional because of that duality.
Hmm.
So the nature of duality.
Why
Now,
did we become so disconnected from that?
oh well, everybody talks about from Aristotle or Descartes or the mechanical view of the universe,
Yeah.
entropy. We fix the age of reductionism means that we actually pull ourselves away from the whole and focus on
Compartment,
small
silo.
aspects. Those small aspects, unfortunately, when you work only on an aspect of life, you'll guaranteed end up with unintended consequences.
Hmm.
So this work is primarily about how we work with wholes, and it's a fundamentally different way of being. This is not about adding pieces together and drawing pie charts, right? We all have pie charts with all the different aspects. That's just
Hmm.
that's just a list of fragments in a circle.
Yeah.
It's not a whole. A whole holds energies, and just to underline, maybe we can get back to this. We
Hmm.
we hold wholes by looking at the essence of the entity, the essence, the inherent, the intrinsic nature, the uniqueness, the essence. The premise is, and we're not the only ones saying this, philosophers are saying this, religions are saying this, that every living and even non-living entity has a unique essence that makes it who it is. And the simple perspective about regeneration is that if we honored that essence in everyone and everything, we would live in an entirely different world. But
Hmm.
we generally try to impose my nature on you. So this
Hmm.
is not, I'm not honoring you if I'm insisting you think like I do. I should be in, I would want to be in dialogue with
Hmm.
you to understand how you're thinking, and then we co-evolve, right?
Hmm.
And the same thing goes with nature, with life. Every place has a unique nature. Uh, Antwerp is different than Strasbourg, right?
Hmm.
Well, why? If you don't know that, then what gives you the right to work there? That's like me just telling Matthew, you're gonna love what I'm doing here, Matthew, because I'm really smart and you're not. And I'm gonna you'll appreciate it. You'll eventually appreciate it. Well, no, that's not the way. So how do we actually collaboratively learn together?
Hmm.
And our job in nature is to actually learn from nature. So let me get back to the law of three for a second. So the law of
Hmm.
three, when people hear this, they say, and this is one quote from a developer: "We don't believe you. We don't know how you do this, but if you can, you're worth 15 years worth of lawyers. So we'll give you 2 months. Are you willing to work for two? We'll give you 2 months of consulting time, and we'll give it a shot because our back is against the wall. We have 25 activist groups who all call us the enemy. And if you can harmonize that, uh, that's worth a tremendous amount of money. So we did, and in 3 weeks, we actually got all those activist groups over the hill, over
Amazing.
the hump. Um, because people want to be. Well, that's a longer story, but people want to be in relationship.
Hmm.
We're social animals. We just have the process of becoming, the process of development, the process of understanding that we're all connected. Uh, we've, especially in the United States, we're a bunch of cowboys, as the world is witnessing, and we're all we feel that don't tread on me. It's all about me. And of course, the United States was founded. We can get into politics. The United States was founded on being a commonwealth. How do we have things in common? But we've forgotten that.
Hmm.
So, and the world's forgotten it. We're not the only ones suffering
No,
here. But
no, I think it's very interesting to understand that when you're able to hold different, or this is reminds me of something I learned from one of my mentors, is like when you can hold different viewpoints at the same time that are also contradictory, you're actually what you told about the esoteric work, you're getting closer to becoming God, because God has infinite viewpoints. God will always forgive you, and will always, whatever you do, it will, yeah, if you think about that. So
100%.
the closer you can get, the more, if you can understand, like me, I want to build green spaces and do regeneration. And so if I would be like a, if that would be my only silo of thoughts, I go to a investors or developers, say like, hey, you have to do more green stuff, and they say, well, it's not going to make me more money. Then I say, oh, they're the bad guys, the developers. And that's that exact what you explained. Whereas if I'm, and that's actually the current process that I'm in, I'm meeting a lot of developers and in real estate investors, landowners, and I try to understand their angle and see how can I match that with my perspective. And it's becoming very interesting that they also see, oh, if I improve the green space of my buildings, I might actually have a higher return on investment. Okay, now we're talking, and I think that's that process what you explained happening. So it's
Absolutely,
very interesting.
absolutely. Yeah, and I just want to underline what you said about when you're working with conflict or you're working with paradox. Paradox is an indicator you're working with life on its own terms.
That's a good one. People are afraid of paradox,
Yeah, they
but it's
are.
a
Well,
good thing.
that's the either or logic
Yeah,
in our culture. This is the dualism.
yeah,
I'm right or you're right.
yeah,
Well, that's why we have lawyers. They basically want to win.
yeah.
They don't want to harmonize.
Hmm.
Rarely.
No, that's
So
true.
okay. Anyway, that's
No, I think it's great, and I want to go more to like, so the logical consequence when you start to understand, like, oh, you can actually have contradictory opinions, and we can both be right. So now let's start to work, and then the question is, okay, how do you harmonize? How do you actually get, let's say, someone who's wants to make money as an investor with someone who wants to build green spaces for better nature or whatever the purpose is? How do you marry those two? And how does that look in your work?
yeah, yeah, that's good. Okay, so let me say one thing. A lot
Hmm.
of people say, well, how do you convince these developers who just want to make return on investment?
Yeah.
And my perspective is I don't try anymore. I uh, I tried to convince people for years to tell them what is right and wrong. Well, that's not very well received. They really have to experience that in themselves.
Hmm.
So, however, there are enough people, if you are actually in integrity with your beliefs and not apologizing for them, this is who you are, this is what you believe, you'll find people that are ready. There's
Hmm.
a lot of people that are ready for this.
Yeah.
So, but don't try to think that you need to convince people because don't waste your time. Move on.
Hmm.
Uh, that's one bit of advice. Um, let's see, where was I going to go with that now? Uh, Prompt me again, Matthew,
Yeah.
because
So we were talking about the relationships. And so if you come in those situations where I might have a perspective, let's say, again, I want to regenerate an area of the planet, a certain project, that's like that excites me the most, even personally. That's why I
Mhm.
do this work. But then I'm going to be in contact with developers, landowners who their biggest interests is to make more money, for example. So how do I, and as obviously as quick as possible, find out, or, and then I don't want to use convince because I'm not going to convince them, but make them understand that this is the right approach. How do you actually do that?
Yeah. Well, good. And we do have lots of different ways of different techniques, if you will, to the first is people don't learn. Here's a premise, a principle. People will not learn until they have a question. That's a universal truth. Unless you have a question internally, it doesn't have to be externalized, but they have to have some little niggle of curiosity. And you want to find out what that curiosity is and speak to that. Not tell them the way they need to be, but find out what makes them why are they even talking to you in the first place? You also want to another way to get at this is to ask them the nature of their purpose and their role. What's their role? What's their
What's the
purpose?
difference between what is the nature of your purpose versus what is your purpose? Is that the same thing?
Yes, yeah, that's the same thing.
Okay.
You have a role. I mean, to be really pedantic, you have a role, and the project has a purpose.
Yeah.
But that's let's not worry about
No, no, no.
that distinction.
That's fine. So the
Um,
nature of the purpose, yeah.
and we ask people to think about the value that they're adding to that larger system that they're nested within.
Hmm.
Is it, how do you want to affect this larger system? Do you want to affect this larger system? Sometimes that's the first time they've ever thought about that it's even possible. Or what, what do you want to transform through this work? Not an objective, not an object. We have plenty of objects. What wants to be transformed? If they can't go there, if that question is too obtuse or esoteric for them, you probably don't want to spend any time. But if you find a question that actually piques their curiosity, that's where you're starting to build energy and relationship that allows you to explore further.
Hmm.
So this is always about helping them understand themselves rather than you helping them understand you, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense because now we're back to like, let's say nature as a big whole works in a specific way. And so a lot of people are going through life and they are working against that idea. So
Mhm.
if you can guide them to get more to how nature works and not just how plants work, but let's say the whole universe works, now you're gonna bring them into alignment with the work you want to do or whatever your purpose is.
Well, the
I
first
feel.
step is the first for them to be curious within themselves. Who do I want
Mhm,
to be? What
mhm,
do I want to see as an outcome? What do I believe for my children or my grandchildren, right? Getting them associated out beyond their immediate needs and perceptions.
mhm.
And then we use lots of these frameworks that I described earlier. We use Carol Sanford has a really fun one called the four modern paradigms: extract value, arrest disorder, or slow down the damage. So, extract value, that's pretty much the way our culture works now. We
Oh yeah.
extract ore from the earth and nutrients from the soil and spirit from employees. Um, so, that's extract value. Then, arrest disorder or slow down the damage. This is where the green building movement is. This is where the sustainability movement is primarily.
Yeah, doing things less bad.
Yep, less bad. And then there's do good, which sound really good, except how do you know what good to do? So do good often is me imposing my
Posing.
view of the world on you. This is what the AID, the World Bank has done all over the world. We're going to show you the way the Europeans work
Yeah,
because
it's the
people
Green
great
Deal.
quality.
The European Green Deal is all about now farmers have to do this, or
Yes.
no, we have to do that. And they're
So that's
freaking out.
that's do good, and that's a form of colonialism, if you will. Doing good is colonialism. Now,
Yep.
that's a cynical view. Of course, doing good is wonderful, wonderful aspirations, but how do you know what good to do? And that goes to the next paradigm. That paradigm is evolve inherent potential, or work with the essence, because the inherent potential comes out of the essence of every living entity.
Hmm.
Not problems, but potential. So this is a gigantic distinction, is that we always work with potential. We do not try to solve problems.
Hmm.
Nature always works with potential.
Hmm.
A forest fire comes through or a hurricane comes through and destroys an ecosystem, let's say. Nature doesn't try to solve one little problem or other. It just gets to work. Pioneering species, early succession species, mid-level succession, just keeps on marching. It doesn't go to the pub and drink herself in sorrow, right? Keeps going. There's always potential. Life is full of potential. So, and this is why we do Story of Place, because the Story of Place is about helping people understand the essence and the potential of their particular place. And that is energizing. And basically, what we do with that, just to jump into some very pragmatics, we help people fall in love with life again through that process.
Hmm.
We're helping them see how life works. We help them see their role in this place and the potential that exists. And that is a incredibly powerful unifier. It's not guilt. It's not a checklist. It's building a field of care. And there's the secret sauce.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm taking notes as we speak. That's very interesting. And so, a few more things that I want to unpack. First one is, yeah, let's go there even. Like, I would love to understand because I feel this is a topic that is not much talked about and often frowned upon, is the whole point of how do we use the financial institute, money, sales, all those things to actually move forward. Like, I meet so many people that are great practitioners in regeneration, like, they're good at designing something, they're good at building it in insane things, they're great at helping nature restore whatever it is, they're really really good at it. But then when it comes to them making business, because in a business we need, there has to be a sort of an exchange, and the tool we have, which is actually a great innovation in my opinion, is money,
Yeah.
because we don't have to trade potatoes for a landscape design.
Yeah.
Money can help us do that way better. So I'd love to understand, like, and what the point I'm seeing is that a lot of people in our industry, whether or not you agree they are part of the industry, they are kind of scared of money, and they have like the money doesn't grow on trees, and they also feel like, oh, if it's good for nature, maybe it has to be very cheap, or we have to do it for free, or it should be NGO type of work. And now we're coming back to the do good for free almost.
Yeah.
So my question is, how was in your personal journey, how did you go about that, and how do you think, or what's the best piece of advice for young people starting out in the regeneration world to actually build a business of impact
Yeah.
in that
Well,
regard?
great. This is important. So my philosophy is that profit is essential.
Hmm.
I don't care what you call it, capitalism or whatever, but if you
Yeah.
don't have a margin or extra resources when you're done with work, you're stuck. You can't
Mm.
invest anything. You can't, but what is it? A cherry tree blows thousands of blossoms and seeds, right? It's a lot of excess there in order
Mhm.
for something to take hold. Well, you need to be having those resources so that you can further this work. So never be ashamed of profit. Now,
Mhm.
you should be ashamed of excess and egregious profit, like the billionaires out there today, which is just it's ridiculous. Warren Buffett made a statement. The investor at Berkshire, the famous investor in the United
Mhm.
States, very very wealthy man. He did this maybe 20 or 30 years ago. He said, "No one is worth more than $300,000 a year. No one." That doesn't mean that you're worth less. It's just whether you're a plumber or a regenerative practitioner or an architect or a CEO of a company, everybody has their unique skill set. Just because I know how to work with spreadsheets and be an effective leader doesn't mean I should be getting more money than a plumber.
Mm.
So I'm a big fan of universal basic income,
Mhm.
um, but that being said, uh, no matter what you're doing, you deserve to be able to make a living, and you deserve to be able to reinvest that to further the mission of this work. So I've never, so I am not very, I'm not a very happy money person. We were very poor when I was a kid, so I am, I am not comfortable being poor, but
Mhm.
I'm certainly not. I certainly don't need to be rich, and I'm not rich at all. But but how do you value but I mean, look, I think this is wealth behind me. Um, but the nature of being in business is also to value yourself. And so from the
Mm.
very beginning, we found here, I'll give you a little background on Regenesis. We thought that we would be hired by government, at least I thought we'd be hired by governments and NGOs and nonprofits who would understand the mission better. Zero, zero, because bureaucracies don't understand how to work this way. They don't understand how to work with holes, right? Bureaucracies are checklist people. And so what was interesting is what I call at-risk developers, real estate developers were our clients who were willing to say, you know what, I need to leave a legacy for my grandkids. I've done some pretty crappy developments in the past.
Mhm.
I need to, you're talking a language I need to respond to. Or they wanted to be, they knew that sustainability was important and they heard regeneration. They said, oh, that sounds like a better sustainability. We want that. So whatever the reason was, which was never entirely noble, but it was better than nothing,
Mm.
we got hired. And the projects were big enough. Now, one of the complaints that many people have not, some people have observed to me is that, well, all your clients are wealthy. Yeah, they are. Because people with those kind of resources and margins in their life can afford to take risks.
Mm.
So we shouldn't be, they're preparing the way. They're paving the way, if you will, for those of us who don't have those kind of resources to keep
Mhm.
going. Uh, so I guess I'm giving a little mini lecture here, but the we found out by accident that we could actually make a living, make a decent living doing this work, and it's
Mhm.
never stopped. It's for 30 years. It's been the case.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's how you actually increase the impact because you were able to build the team, the staff, the network, and then working. And I agree. Just like it's a business strategy to first work with people that are very wealthy and then can afford your service to use that experience to then make it more affordable over time. That's how Elon Musk built Tesla. He made the
sure,
supercar, electric supercar, that was I think 300,000 at the time. Now you can buy a Tesla, and they're probably even nicer than that sports car that he first sold for 30,000 because all the R&D and the money they made with the high paying clients they could reinvest in making it more affordable.
right. And you don't have to spend the time. I'm working on a big project right now where we're spending so much time bringing them up to just current practice.
Mm.
That ultimately it will be much less costly for us to be engaged.
Hmm.
Um, Trying to think where I had a number of directions I wanted to take this. But from a practitioner's point of view, Matthew, what would you want to explore right now?
That's a good question. Like, I would love to understand. Like, Regenesis is a very known company. It's done something very right in the regenerative world. One of the few companies that has actually um, has a very strong ethic and is actually building those projects as a whole. What is the like? We've already had some insight on the secret sauce, but what do you think was the single most important
Mm.
step that the company took to be where you are today?
Oh, I think the biggest step was the practice of developing
Hmm.
ourselves and managing our being state.
Hmm.
So, three, your chief talks about the three essential aspects of existence: function, being, and will. Rudolf Steiner, Otto Scharmer's work: hand, heart, and mind.
Hmm.
What, how, and why.
Mm.
You need to be holding all those three dimensions. And we spent every week, probably 3 or 4 hours, working on how we actually work on projects, how we work with clients. So we continually practiced and honed our capability, not just doing it, but actually who do we need to be to be effective? How do we present ourselves when somebody's angry or um, not understanding what we're doing or frustrated? Because everybody, by the way, most people are always frustrated with their work
Hmm.
because we're not doing a project. And one of the, let me go sideways here for a second. When I tell our developer clients and architects who we're working with, your project is not the project. The project is life.
Hmm.
Your project will emerge from that understanding.
Hmm.
So we ask our clients to throw away all their master planning, throw away all their designs, because more than likely, maybe they're good, we don't know, but more than likely, we need to discover first principles and how this place works, and then how this development can actually support how this place works. Your
Hmm.
project is secondary if you care about regeneration and sustainability. Now, that's an act of faith. And many clients or first clients will say, well, or they're looking at working with us, they'll say, well, tell me what you're going to do. I say, well, we can tell you a general process because we actually develop contracts. We have very accurate fee proposals. Well, they say, well, no, I want to know what you're going to do in this project because what they want is control. And
Hmm.
no one is ever in charge. See, there's no one is ever in control, but we think we are. So the first big breakthrough or breakdown that has to happen is to abandon a sense of control. And they'll say, and people have said to me, well, no, I need to know what you're going to do in this project so I can actually trust you. And I said, you can't. So if that doesn't work for you, now imagine this 30 years ago. We had no project experience to go on. So we had some really trusted clients. Now we can say, go talk to those folks. They'll give you the same idea. And they
Hmm.
do. We have
Hmm.
clients who we have clients who we actually hire some of our clients to work with us on projects now. And they will say to our new client, just trust the process, trust the process. Pooh, right over their head.
Yeah.
You don't know the process. So this is really an act of faith.
Hmm.
It isn't for everybody. So that's is why when we're interviewing and uh, determining whether we're going to work with a new client or not, it's just as much we're in a way we're interviewing them to see if they have the will
Hmm.
to go through this work.
Oh yeah,
I'm,
that's
I'm, I'm kind of rambling around here. I don't know if I have a point
no,
to
no,
make.
no. I think this, like, I asked you like what is the best thing that Regenesis did in order to be at the
Uh,
level you are, and that's exactly what you did. You hold onto your integrity first of all, but then you
right.
also you don't work with anyone. You just like you want to work with the people that trust you, that want to take that leap of faith.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you might start working together, and then they will micromanage you, or as you go through the process they're like, oh, but what's coming? And yeah, if there's trust is the biggest, is the
Yeah.
most important thing to be able to do great
But
results.
here's the deal. No one understands. I mean, I know that you know this about you, is that no one understands what sustainability, what's required for sustainability. No one understands what's required for regeneration. Heck, we don't either. We're trying to figure this out. Every project, we're figuring this out.
Yeah.
And so, um, there are always going to be moments where the client will say, "What the hell is going on here?" They don't understand. And this is where it is so important to be able to manage your state of being, to
Mm.
allow the client to thrash around and
Yeah.
get angry,
Yeah.
because
And
transformation is this is truly transformative stuff. This is not
yeah.
just more of the same.
No.
And change is hard for people, and they will react in many ways. I mean, we've been fired many times, and I want to qualify that. We've been fired many times, and every project we've been fired on, we've been rehired within a year. And I think that's kind of spectacular. I don't suggest that as a business model, but it is really amazing that they've been touched in a different way and they have to process that. And it's not easy because it is a paradigm shift.
Oh yeah, totally. I feel even, yeah, even listening to you, and even for me, it's challenging to go like, okay, yeah, now I can go and do that in my work. No, it doesn't work like that. It's like, yeah, as a shift in being, you gotta set the intention and then figure it out along the way. I think that's, yeah, that's how I've actually grown my business the most too. Is like doing these things that you don't know how you're actually gonna do it, but you know, like, I'll find a way,
Yeah.
uh, and then it
Step out.
works. And it's
So
it's yeah, it's uncomfortable at times. Hmm.
So Regenesis has pretty much turned into an educational institution because we're getting old
Hmm.
and we're not going to be around. So how does this carry on? And that's definitely the right place to go. I'm still pretty much primary. I'm a faculty member also of the institute, but primarily a practitioner in projects.
Hmm.
Um, but the reason I'm telling you this is that in the regenerative practitioner, which is this kind of opening introductory course on how to work with these frameworks, the first session is on managing your state of being. And most everybody who takes the course says, what does this have to do with projects, right? Let's get to the yeah, okay. Well, let's get to the projects. And,
Well, this is
and
the thing.
but this is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And it took me 10 years working with Regenesis to figure that out. It took me 10 years to actually realize, oh, this really is about my development and me not being a jerk. Because, yeah, let me just a simple way of picturing this. We call it 3 lines of work: self or inner whole. There could be the project self, but self, group, and system. So
Mhm.
the only way we get things done in our culture is through a group of people. Generally, teams or organizations are effective in getting things done. Individuals rarely can do anything on their own. But if I'm a jerk, and we're all jerks in many ways, but if I'm a jerk and I'm really an outwardly obnoxious jerk, then the group is going to have to spend a lot of time dealing with my jerkiness. And so the group will not be effective. So in order for the group to be effective, I have to be managing my own state of being. We all
Mm.
do. And then this in service. So what is the group in service to? The group has to have something larger that they're in service to, whether it's a customer base, if you're a company, or an ecosystem, or a place, if you're working in landscape or architecture development. So the 3 lines of work are self, group, system, and all of them are equally important. And so in our projects, we are asking people to be reflective. We're not trying to tell them to think a certain way or to be a certain way. Just
Mhm.
reflect on their what's informing their state of being so they can manage that state. They can reflect, self remember. We call self
Mhm.
observing, self remembering.
Mhm.
And just helping people pausing and reflecting is a very powerful mechanism. Not assuming that everybody's on the same page, because guaranteed, 100% of people are not on the same page.
Mhm.
And this is why most of this work is about alignment around belief and philosophy.
Yeah, and
And
creating a space to facilitate that is probably
that's right.
um, where everyone can self-reflect, and then more alignment seems to
Yep.
get born from there. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I've been very inspired, Bill, by our conversation, and we're nearing the end. I still want to ask one question related to looking into the future, and you and me knowing, like, okay, we want to have an impact in the world. We want to, and I have to be careful now, do good, not necessarily, but we know that there's a lot of challenges that our planet is facing, and we also see that the movement is maybe not going fast enough. What do you think is the biggest challenge for regeneration to become mainstream? Or is that something that we should work for, push for? Like,
No.
how do we get it out of the fringes into,
No.
like, everyone does it?
Yeah, this whole discussion about speed and panic,
Uh-huh.
um, I don't think that's the right way to go about this.
No.
We are already in collapse, Matthew. So this is not something in the future. This is happening now. And I don't want to be cavalier about this because it will sound cavalier, but we all die. Now,
Of
our
course.
children, I mean, that is an agonizing thing to think about. But what we are going to leave behind is what's important.
Mm.
So, can we fix it? I don't know, maybe. Um, what's more important is to change to evolve our very nature. So this work is primarily about building a field of energy, a field of love, if you will. And panic doesn't build that.
No.
So our being state in the face of disaster, in the face of pain, in the face of self-centered politics, what's important is to model the future that we want. And hopefully the people that remain are our children, because there will be survivors, I hope. Certainly progeny, but not pronouncing the word right. Um, they'll have a different spirit and a different nature about them. So This work is about not building panic, but building a sense of equanimity and care and love. And I believe that will take care of itself
Hmm. Yeah.
because we can't fix it. We can only fix ourselves. This gets back to who I am and
Hmm.
who we need to be. If it's an outward if we're thinking it's an outward, I'm going to fix you, Matthew, because I don't like your hair, how long your hair is, whatever.
Appreciate
Right?
the comment.
But you know what I mean? My judgment doesn't help. Um, and you would perceive it as judgment, but my care will help.
Yeah.
My care for you as a person, my care
Yeah.
for me and our relationship is what. So, and I think what's important is to help us help. And the beauty of this work is that nature self-organizes if we just work with her on her own terms. So it's just
Hmm.
loving nature on her own terms. It's loving
Hmm.
you on your own terms. And
Yeah.
this is what this essence to essence relationship is about. Honoring your essence, honoring the essence of a place is the gift we can give.
Yeah, I love that. I think the beingness of starting with yourself, and then that kind of gets contagious and goes on to other people, either by example, or you create curiosity and they want to find out more of like, oh, what are you doing? How are you doing that?
That's right.
Then okay, let's work, or you can study with us or whatever. That's that's the way to create impact, because all the other ways of imposing, of forcing change, or going in a panic mode has never really worked. So
No.
I agree with you. Yeah, great. Well, Bill, we're at the end of our interview. What's one final thing you would like to share to our audience before we wrap it up? Also, how can people get in touch with you, with Regenesis, with what you're doing, if they want to help out or be part of the movement?
Yeah, well, the website, the education group, the institute website is Regenerats with it's like
Regenerate, I love it.
Regenerats with a dot es, so regenerat.es. So it sounds like we're from Spain, right? But we're not. Just Regenerats. That gets you to the institute, and then there's regenesisgroup.com
Hmm.
is the practice group, and the websites are all going to be changed in the next few months. But
Okay.
um, yeah, so and mine, you can get me at bill@regenesisgroup.com if
Hmm.
there's any questions. I think, I think in a parting comment would be just what you and I just left. I think that's the most important thing. It's our state of being and becoming. You know, Maturana and Varela talk about life and the definition of life, and to paraphrase it, life is the process of becoming. And you know, that's what we're working with sustainability is life on its own terms. So life is continually evolving, and how do we actually stay in that process? That's our job, to not only stay in the process, but to actually guide the process, and also because we have a role to play. It's not that we
Hmm.
should be passive, but also pay attention because we might screw it up, probably will. So to continually observe cause and effect. It's a dance, so a dance of life.
Hmm. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that. Well, Bill, thank you very much for coming on, and hope to see you again soon.
indeed. Thanks, Matthew. Delightful.